The morning sun rose over Ekunzi, stretching its golden fingers across fields still wet with dew. From the hills came the heartbeat of drums, deep, ancient, alive. Their rhythm rolled through the village like a living spirit, stirring even the oldest bones awake. Cocks crowed, children yawned, and smoke curled from clay huts as women began to cook the day's first meal. The elders sat beneath the iroko tree, murmuring proverbs as the young men prepared for the day's labor. It was a land of proud warriors and whispering ancestors, a place where every sound carried a story, and every story carried a lesson. But not all hearts in Ekunzi beat with peace. Beneath the laughter that floated through the market air, fear walked with quiet steps. The river sang, the goats bleated, and the women bartered for yams and oil. Yet when one name passed through the air, voices fell to whispers, Okoro. Even the birds seemed to stop their songs, their wings still in the branches. Children were told not to stare when he walked by, not even to breathe too loud. Mothers would pull their daughters close, whispering prayers under their breath. Okoro was once the pride of Ekunzi, strong, charming, fearless in the hunt, quick with his smile. But strength, when left unchecked, rots like meat in the sun. What once made him a hero had now made him a tyrant. His laughter was no longer joy, it was thunder that came after pain. He ruled his compound with the hand of a beast. He beat his servants until their shadows feared him. He struck his friends when they disagreed, and when his wives displeased him, the whole village could hear their cries. Fear is respect. He would roar, his chest bare, eyes wild like a man drunk on his own power. A man who is not feared is not a man at all. No one dared to answer. The elders said he was cursed by Allah, the goddess of the earth, for forgetting his duty as protector. The younger men said he was simply mad. Yet all bowed their heads when his footsteps approached, for in Ekunzi, silence was safer than truth. Then came the night the river wept. The sky cracked open with thunder, and rain poured like the wrath of spirits. The wind howled through the huts, and dogs barked at shadows that had no shape. In Okoro's compound, his wife Nena cried out one last time, a cry that the storm swallowed whole. By morning she was gone. Some whispered that she had run away, tired of his fists and fire. Others swore her spirit lingered by the riverbank, weeping with the frogs each night. But none dared to ask Okoro what truly happened. Those who had seen his eyes after that night said they carried something darker than anger, something hollow. He told no one where she went, and when the market women whispered about her, he only smiled and said, "The river takes what it wants." From that day, the river's song changed. It no longer danced with laughter. It murmured with sorrow, like a mother calling a lost child's name. And the people of Ekunzi, though they did not say it aloud, began to leave offerings by its edge, cowrie shells, palm oil, and quiet prayers. For they knew that in the land of the living and the land of spirits, nothing disappears without leaving a shadow behind. The smell of herbs, smoke and palm oil filled the small hut of Mama Ekwe, the oldest woman in Ekunzi. She sat cross-legged before a clay bowl filled with burning leaves, her eyes half closed as she whispered to the spirits. Charms hung from the roof, feathers, cowries, bones, and red strings. The villagers gathered outside her door, whispering among themselves, afraid yet drawn by the weight of her words. When Mama Ekwe finally spoke, her voice cracked like a dry branch. The earth has eyes. The river has ears. No man who mocks the gods escapes their justice. She looked at the people one by one, her gaze resting last on Okoro, who stood at the edge of the crowd, arms folded across his chest. Okoro smirked. "The gods?" he said, his tone thick with arrogance. "They fear my hands as men do. If they are gods, let them strike me now." The villagers gasped, stepping back as thunder rolled faintly across the sky. Mama Ekwe spat into the fire, her eyes sharp with sorrow. "The drum of pride beats loud, my son, but it always calls the storm." Okoro only laughed, his teeth flashing in the dim light. "Let the storm come. I am Okoro, son of Ekunzi. Even the gods know my strength." He walked away, his laughter echoing through the marketplace, leaving the people to stare after him in uneasy silence. Days passed, and Okoro's pride grew fatter than a feast goat. He began boasting at the market, surrounded by men who nodded in false admiration. "I will marry again," he declared, pounding his chest. "But not a timid woman. Let the gods themselves send me one who can tame my fire. If they dare." The market fell quiet. Women paused with baskets of cassava on their heads, and traders exchanged glances. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. An old man selling yams muttered under his breath, "The gods have long ears, Okoro. Be careful what you call." But Okoro only grinned, his voice booming over the crowd. "I call to them. Let them test me." That night, the moon hung low and red, heavy with warning. In Okoro's courtyard lay a cracked drum, the same one he had broken the night Nena disappeared. It sat silent now, its split wood darkened by rain and time, an omen the villagers pretended not to see. The drum was once the heart of his home, the sound of joy. Now it lay lifeless, a reminder that peace had left with his wife. By the riverbank, the goddess Ayla stirred. Her waters shimmered faintly beneath the moonlight, ripples forming where no wind blew. She had watched the cruelty, the pride, the mocking of the sacred. From her depths came whispers, soft, steady, and ancient, of justice yet to come. When the next evening fell, clouds began to gather above Ikunzi like angry spirits. The air thickened, the wind moaned, and the first drops of rain struck the ground like tears. The villagers hurried into their huts, bolting doors and clutching their children. Thunder split the sky in jagged flashes. It was not a normal storm. It was the kind that made elders whisper, "Allah walks tonight." Inside his compound, Okoro sat drinking palm wine, his eyes blazing with drunken pride. The rain lashed the earth, yet amid the storm he heard something strange. Footsteps, slow, steady, coming closer. He rose unsteadily, squinting through the curtain of rain. A tall figure stood at his gate, a woman draped in red, her veil glistening with water. Her laughter rolled softly through the night, deep and calm like thunder before a strike. "Who are you?" Okoro shouted over the storm. The woman lifted her face, and the lightning revealed eyes that glowed like wet embers. Her voice was serene, echoing through the rain. "I am Amara, daughter of the wandering wind, sent by the ancestors." "The river led me here," Okoro smirked, though a flicker of unease danced in his chest. "So the gods finally sent me a challenge?" he said, stepping closer, wine dripping from his hand. Amara smiled, the kind of smile that hides storms behind calm waters. "Not a challenge," she whispered, "a lesson." From the darkened huts around them, the villagers watched through narrow windows, their hearts trembling. The wind howled louder, the lightning grew brighter, and in their souls, they knew. The gods had answered. That night, as the rain swallowed the earth, Ikunzi whispered a new fear. "The woman with the laugh of thunder has come." And though Okoro's smile did not fade, his shadow began to tremble. For the storm had not ended. It had only just begun. When Amara entered Okoro's home, the air itself seemed to shift. The fire in the hearth hissed softly, and the shadows leaned closer as if curious to see the woman who smiled at thunder. Her presence was calm but heavy, like the still air before a storm. She said little, yet her silence carried weight. Okoro watched her from the corner of his eye, the same man who once made grown men tremble. But now he found himself uneasy. When she moved, her steps made no sound. When she smiled, it was not from joy, but from knowing something he did not. The villagers whispered among themselves, "She carries the calm of storms," and truly she did. For when Okoro shouted, her face did not change. When he boasted, her gaze remained steady. The first night she stayed, thunder rolled outside the compound, but Amara only looked at the sky and murmured, "Even storms must obey the will of Allah." Her words crawled under Okoro's skin. He had married her thinking she would fear him, yet her calmness burned hotter than any fire. In the days that followed, Okoro grew restless. He tried to test her strength, to see if she could be broken like all the others. He hurled sharp words at her, cruel, cutting things meant to draw tears. But Amara never flinched. Instead, she answered with silence so deep it made him feel naked before his own anger. One morning, after he slammed a clay pot on the floor, shattering it to pieces, Amara only looked at the shards and said softly, "When pride dances too loud, the earth listens with anger." Her voice was gentle, but it cut deeper than a blade. From that moment, Okoro began to feel watched, not just by her eyes but by something unseen. When he walked through his house, it was as if his own walls were whispering. The man who once ruled with fear now found no peace, not even in his own compound. Yet, beyond those walls, Amara became the heart of Ekunzi. She visited the sick, fed hungry children, and helped widows rebuild broken huts. Her laughter carried through the village like cool water after heat. The elders nodded when they saw her, and the youth whispered blessings in her name. The gods sent her to heal what Okoro broke, one old woman said at the market, and others agreed. For every act of kindness Amara gave, Okoro's shadow seemed to grow darker. At home, her peace turned into his torment. Her laughter, soft and musical, became the very thing that mocked him. He would shout her name in anger, and she would hum an old river song, her voice flowing like water through the cracks of his fury. One night, as he watched her sitting by the window with her head tilted toward the moon, something in her melody struck him deeply. It was the same tune Nena used to hum before she vanished into the storm. His chest tightened. The air grew cold. For a moment, he saw Amara's reflection in the window blur. Two faces overlapping, one living, one ghostly. He blinked hard, but the vision lingered like smoke. That night, sleep refused to stay. The wind carried strange whispers from the river, his name, soft but accusing. He turned and tossed, but the sound grew louder. Then came the dream. He stood by the riverbank, the moonlight silvering the waves. From the water rose Nena, her eyes wet with sorrow, her voice breaking like reeds in the wind. "She will teach you what I could not," she whispered. "And when the river speaks, listen." Okoro tried to reach her, but his hands passed through mist. He woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat. His chest heaved, his pride trembling for the first time. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, carrying a woman's laughter, low, knowing, and full of promise. And in that sound, Okoro understood a truth too late. The gods had not sent him a wife. They had sent him a mirror. Okoro's house no longer breathed peace. The walls listened. The air watched. Even the fire crackled with unease. But Amara, she had changed too. No longer soft like morning dew, she had become something else. When Okoro shouted, she smiled. A calm, haunting smile that seemed to mock the thunder in his voice. When he lifted his hand, she vanished into the folds of shadow, leaving him striking only air and silence. One evening, he roared, "You think your silence can rule me?" Amara only looked at him and said softly, "You cannot command what no longer fears you." Her voice was calm, but her words cut like sharpened glass. That night, Okoro did not sleep. The sound of his own breath frightened him. Outside, the villagers whispered, "Okoro's house no longer belongs to the living alone." And deep within those walls, something unseen began to stir. Soon after, strange things began to happen. The nights grew heavier, and the air carried whispers that had no mouths. Okoro would wake to the sound of dripping water, steady and slow, though the skies had not wept in weeks. Footsteps echoed through empty halls, soft as if someone was walking with bare feet across his soul. One night, he sat by the fire, clutching his staff, when he heard it. Two voices. One was calm and tender, humming the river song. The other cried softly, a sound full of sorrow and old pain. His eyes darted around the room, but he saw no one. He called out, "Who walks in my house?" The voices fell silent, and only the flames answered with a hiss. By morning, the elders refused to pass by his gate. The gods have begun their work. one muttered, and no man should interrupt them. As the moons changed, so did the land. Okoro's crops bent low and died, even while his neighbors harvested golden yams. His goats bleated wildly and refused to step inside the compound, eyes wide with unseen terror. The proud man who once roared at the village market now ate in silence, his head low. His wives from the past had feared him, but Amara had changed the very ground beneath his feet. When he stepped outside, laughter followed him, soft and mocking. The women at the well whispered, "The lion has found his hunter." Even the children watched him with secret smiles. Okoro began to dread the setting sun, for it was in the night that his pride suffered most. Then came the evening that silenced even laughter. A young boy named Kalechi ran through the village, his face pale with fear. He swore he saw Amara standing by the river, her wrapper dry while rain poured from the heavens. "She was talking to the water," he cried, "and the water was listening." The villagers gathered, murmuring among themselves. Some said she was a spirit, others said the gods had chosen her as a messenger. But all agreed, the balance in Ekunzi had shifted, and fear had returned to walk among them. Inside his compound, Okoro sat alone. His hands trembled as he tried to eat. His voice, once like thunder, had become a weak murmur, yet anger still burned in his chest, refusing to die. He stood, pounding his staff on the ground. "You will not break me, woman," he shouted to the empty air. "I am Okoro, the lion of Ekunzi." But the words betrayed him. His voice cracked. His staff fell from his shaking hand. Every curse he spoke echoed back at him, weaker, emptier. The strength that once ruled men was slipping away like sand between his fingers. From outside, faint laughter drifted in, the laughter of those who once feared him. Okoro fell to his knees, clutching his chest, whispering to the gods who no longer listened. For the first time, the lion knew the taste of his own silence. And as the wind moved through his broken house, it carried Amara's voice, soft and distant. Even thunder bows when its echo fades. The night sat heavy upon Okoro's compound. Sleep refused to come, twisting restlessly on his mat, his mind gnawed by whispers he could not silence. The storm outside had passed, but its echoes lingered in his chest. Something inside him urged him to seek his old charm bag, the one he had buried deep in his chest of memories, the one he believed once gave him power over men and spirits alike. He rose, muttering to himself, "Let me remind the gods who I am." But when he reached under the wooden bed, his fingers brushed against something unfamiliar. It was a small clay pot, sealed tightly with red cloth and strung with river beads. His breath caught. The markings on the pot were old, the symbols of Allah, goddess of the earth, and Ofo, spirit of justice. With trembling hands, he unwrapped the cloth. Inside lay cold ashes, 3 smooth river stones, and a single strand of hair, black, delicate, unmistakably Nena's. His vision blurred. The hut seemed to darken as though the air itself recoiled. His heart pounded, each beat heavier than the last. No, it cannot be," he whispered, clutching the strand. The fire in the corner flickered weakly, then flared high, casting long shadows across the walls, shadows that seemed to move when he didn't. He stumbled back, voice breaking. "Amara, what witchcraft is this?" But the only answer was the wind through the cracks, carrying a faint hum. The river song Nena once sang before her silence swallowed her forever. Amara appeared at the doorway, her face calm, her eyes glimmering like moonlit water. Okoro's voice trembled between rage and fear. "You dare mock me with this? With the dead woman's hair?" She did not flinch. "You buried her in silence," she said softly, her words steady as drumbeats. "I came to speak for her." The clay pot slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor, scattering ashes and stones. The smell of river mud filled the air. Okoro fell to his knees, eyes wide with dread. "Who are you?" he whispered. "What are you?" Amara stepped closer, and for a moment, the air behind her shimmered, like a second figure stood within her shadow. Her voice deepened, carrying a power not her own. "I am what your pride summoned. What your silence birthed. The gods do not forget what men choose to bury. Okoro's knees weakened. His strength melted into the earth. He could not speak, could not breathe. Every injustice he had cast into the ground had returned to stand before him. The fire dimmed again, and the hut felt colder than before, as though the ancestors themselves had gathered to witness his reckoning. Outside, the village slept under a clouded moon. The drums that usually guarded the night were silent. Even the wind dared not whisper. Inside Okoro's compound, only one sound lingered, the faint hum of a woman's song rising with the ashes. By dawn, Ekunzi felt different. The people awoke uneasy, their hearts heavy though no one could say why. And in the quiet of his hut, Okoro sat motionless beside the broken clay pot, his eyes hollow with the truth he could no longer deny. Pride had met its mirror, and the reflection had spoken. The storm had been waiting. The air hung thick, trembling with the weight of unseen eyes. Okoro's rage, long fed by fear and pride, finally burst like a rotten fruit. He stepped toward Amara, his face twisted with fury. "You think the gods speak through you?" he roared. "You think your calm can tame me?" Before the last word left his lips, his hand flew, a strike meant to silence, to dominate. But the moment his palm touched her cheek, a crack of pain shot through him. He screamed. His flesh burned as though he had slapped fire itself. The mark on his skin glowed red, and his arm convulsed like it no longer belonged to him. He stumbled backward, clutching his wrist, eyes wide with terror. "What witchcraft? What have you done to me?" Amara did not move. She stood still as the earth, her eyes calm yet fierce. The wind rushed through the hut, shaking the walls, rattling the roof. The ground trembled, pots fell, and firelight danced wildly. Okoro's knees weakened as the floor seemed to pulse beneath his feet. Somewhere in the distance a drum broke, its rhythm silenced by a force older than time itself. Then came the thunder. A single, deafening crack tore across the sky, splitting the heavens open. The flames in the hearth died instantly, replaced by a strange blue light that shimmered like river water. The glow spread slowly, wrapping around Amara's form. Her red veil slipped from her head and floated to the ground. What stood before Okoro was no longer just a woman. Her skin gleamed with light, and her eyes glowed like the heart of a storm. Around her feet, the earth rippled with mist, like waves dancing on land. Okoro gasped, stumbling back until his shoulders hit the wall. "Allah," he whispered, voice shaking. "River Mother, forgive me." Her voice rolled through the hut, calm and deep, echoing like waves against a cliff. "You called upon the gods in your pride," she said. "Now the gods have answered." Okoro fell to his knees, trembling. "Please, please, mercy. I did not know." Ayla's gaze did not soften. "You did not know? Yet every cry that reached the river carried your name. Every drop of blood in this soil knows your hand." Her words vibrated through the air, each syllable heavy with the weight of judgment. "I was not sent to love you, Okoro. I was sent to balance you." Her light grew brighter as she spoke, her voice both sorrowful and commanding. "You buried Nena in silence, and now her tears have become the river's song. The match made in heaven was not a blessing. It was the gods' reminder that balance must always return." Okoro's cries turned to sobs, but his tears were lost in the rising wind. A rumble rose from deep within the ground. The floor split open, and from the crack, cool water began to spill, slowly at first, then faster, until it gushed across the courtyard like an untamed river. The villagers woke to the sound of rushing water and thunder. They gathered at a distance, eyes wide with fear. "There is no rain," one whispered. "Then how can there be a flood?" said another. The ground beneath their feet hummed with power. They saw Amara, or what looked like her, standing tall in the center of the water, her light undimmed. Okoro tried to stand, but the current coiled around his ankles like living chains. His voice broke. "Allah, spare me. I will change. I swear." The water rose higher, swirling with whispers. At first faint, then clearer, voices beneath the surface. Nena's voice came first, soft as the lullabies she once sang. "You cannot undo what you have done, Okoro," she said. "But now you will see what it means to feel what others felt." Then came others, women's voices, dozens of them, their tones mournful, echoing from ages past. "We were the silenced," they sang, "the forgotten, the beaten, the buried. Now the river remembers." Their words filled the air, rising like a sacred hymn of reckoning. Okoro covered his ears, but their voices poured through him. His screams were swallowed by the sound of rushing water and thunder, and as the flood rose, the villagers bowed their heads. None dared to move closer. They watched in silence as the river spirit claimed its due, washing the sins of one man into the endless current of justice. By dawn, the water began to recede, leaving only silence and the faint scent of rain where there had been none. The sun rose weakly, and the villagers whispered prayers to Allah. No one entered Okoro's compound again. They said the ground there still whispered when the wind blew, the voices of the river, reminding all who listened. No man who mocks the gods escapes their justice. Amara's voice deepened, no longer sounding like a woman's, but like thunder itself wrapped in silk. Her body shimmered with blinding light, her feet hovering just above the wet earth. Her skin glowed with ripples of gold and silver, shifting like moonlight on water. Half of her face carried the softness of the woman Okoro once knew, but the other half burned with divine fury, the mark of Allah, the river goddess. Her eyes flashed with the storms of 1,000 forgotten nights. "You who thought love was a weapon," she said, her words echoing through the rain-soaked air, "now feel what it means to be broken." Okoro staggered backward, his breath catching in his throat. The weight of her words pressed against his chest like a mountain. His mind screamed for escape, but his legs refused to move. The air thickened. Every drop of water shimmered with power. The flames that once surrounded them flickered out, leaving only the blue glow of Amara's wrath. Trees bent as if bowing to her presence, and the earth trembled beneath her feet. The villagers, peering from their huts, whispered in terror. "Allah has risen," one old woman cried. "The goddess walks among us." But no one dared to move closer. The river's hum grew louder, a low chant of justice long delayed. Amara raised her hand, and from her palm a wave of light burst forth, wrapping Okoro in its brilliance. He fell to his knees, trembling. "Mercy!" he shouted, his voice breaking. "I will change. I swear to the gods, I will change." But the river had no mercy left to give. Its waters remembered the women who wept, the children who trembled at his rage, the hearts that broke in silence. The earth beneath Okoro split open, and water poured out, not from the sky, but from within the ground itself. The flood rose higher, devouring his hut, his drum, his pride. Okoro screamed as the water swallowed him whole, but his voice vanished beneath the roar of the river. Lightning flashed once more, and then silence. Only the river's song remained. When morning came, the land was still again. The sky blushed with soft gold, and the river flowed gently as though nothing had happened. Where Okoro's house once stood, there was only a single clay pot, glowing faintly with the light of the river. Mama ENKAY approached it with trembling hands and whispered, "The gods have taken what was theirs." From that day forward, the people of Ekunzi spoke of Okoro's fall in hushed tones. Around the fires at night, elders told the tale, of pride that challenged patience and cruelty that summoned its own end. They said Allah's river remembers, and that every tear shed in silence becomes a wave waiting to rise. And so children grew knowing that love is not a thing to conquer, nor a heart to command. For in the land of Ekunzi, no evil goes unanswered, and no river forgets the cry of the broken. Dawn came gently to Ekunzi, as if the heavens were afraid to disturb what had been reborn. The air no longer smelled of smoke or sorrow. Instead, it carried the sweetness of wet earth and healing leaves. The storm had passed, leaving behind silence so deep that even the birds seemed to sing with care. The river, once wild with rage, now hummed softly, a mother's lullaby to her children. The people stepped out of their huts, blinking at the new light. The trees stood taller, The soil felt alive, and every breath carried the weight of something sacred. It was as though the gods themselves had taken a deep breath, and finally exhaled in peace. By the river bank, they found her, Amara. She sat where the water met the land, her red veil gone, her eyes distant as though gazing into two worlds at once. Her presence was neither of a mortal nor a spirit, but something between, calm, ancient, and knowing. The villagers gathered behind her, afraid to speak. Only Mama ENKAY, the oldest among them, dared to step forward. "Child of the river," she whispered. "Is it done?" Amara's lips curved faintly, her voice barely a breeze. Balance is restored. The river sleeps. Then, without another word, she rose. Her feet touched the surface of the water like light touches glass. Slowly, she walked into the river, each step dissolving into ripples that shimmered like mirrors. The villagers watched in silence as she vanished, leaving behind only the soft whisper of flowing water. Days passed, and they waited. Some brought offerings, others sang songs to call her back. But Amara did not return. Only the reflection of the sun danced on the water's surface. Mama ENKAY bowed her head and said to the wind, "Allah has taken her child home. From that day, no one fetched water from that spot without kneeling first, without whispering a prayer to the river's heart." In time, Ekunzi began to change. The men who once roared in pride now spoke with measured voices. The women who once hid their pain began to walk taller, their laughter filling the air like music long forgotten. Children grew listening to the tale of Amara, the spirit who came not to punish but to remind the land of balance. Even the wind in the palm trees seemed softer, as if learning to whisper instead of shout. A new proverb soon bloomed in the markets and on every mother's tongue. A man's strength is tested not by who he beats, but by who he protects. Traders carried it to distant villages, and griots sang it to the rhythm of drums. Warriors recited it before battle. Fathers taught it to their sons at dusk. It became the heartbeat of Ekunzi, the truth carved into its very soil. Where Okoro's house once stood, now lay a shrine, silent, sacred. The cracked drum remained untouched, resting in the dust as a warning and a prayer. Mothers brought their sons to kneel there, to learn the meaning of humility. Offerings of white chalk and palm leaves lined the ground. No one shouted, no one struck. Even the wind spoke only in whispers. The place once cursed by anger became a home for reflection, and then, when the rains returned, the children danced again. Their feet splashed in puddles, their laughter echoing through the trees. But when thunder rolled, they paused. In the sound of the storm, they heard soft laughter, warm and kind like the voice of a mother. The elders smiled knowingly. "That is Amara," they said. "She watches the storm to be sure no hand rises in anger again." So her story lived on, not as mere words, but as a pulse in every heart. Around the evening fires, griots told her tale, how the proud met the patient, how cruelty met its mirror, and how the river restored what men had broken. It became more than memory. It became law. And whenever thunder spoke across the hills of Ekunzi, every soul remembered. Even silence speaks when the gods are listening. Even silence speaks when the gods are listening.